got myself a little project here. In order to complete this project, I even bought myself a new laptop. This is getting expensive quick. So here is a serial cable. This is a Megasquirt ECU or ECM, whichever you want to call it, plug and play. It's going to go into my car, and then I'm going to have full programmable capability. It comes with an intake air temperature sensor, as well as a MAF delete, sorry, not a MAF, I have an airflow meter delete kit. What I will be doing is I'll be running a map sensor. So this map sensor plugs into here, and this plugs right into the stock airflow meter harness. And then this obviously plugs into the engine so that I can get a vacuum signal. My throttle position switch, idle and wide open throttle, is not good enough for this. I need a throttle position sensor. So this is a variable resistance sensor that I'm going to mount on my throttle body. And I have various T's here, I believe. These are some wiring pins. Oh, sorry, this is for when I wire in a coil line waste spark ignition coil. Currently I'm running a distributor which is driven off of my camshaft. I'm going to get rid of that and install a waste spark ignition system which ties into these pigtails. This is a USB to RS-232 converter, and this is a wideband O2 sensor which will plug in to the original stock wiring harness so that the computer will be using a wideband signal instead of a narrowband O2. And this is the car that it's going into. So this airbox here in the long run I'm going to get rid of because I'm not going to need it. Long-term goal is to remove the battery and put it in the trunk, and I'm going to put a turbo here, get rid of the distributor cap over here, put a ignition coil somewhere in the engine bay here, I'm not sure yet where, and most likely relocate the coolant fan and then move the radiator forward or back, and then put the intercooler in front of it, or I put the intercooler into this dead space up here. So we'll have to see. I'm not sure if I have to relocate the washer fluid reservoir. I might just have to. It's fairly big, so it's actually really handy to have a washer fluid of that size. But I might just have to relocate it. And my HID modules, I'm going to have to relocate. So there's actually quite a bit more work ahead of me than I had expected. First things first is I'm going to have to remove the ECU here and put my throttle switch position sensor on here. So let's get cracking. Man, oh man, I really didn't think I'd run into problems with this thing. You know, bought it from a somewhat reputable reseller or seller. Been selling the kits for a while. So anyways, I plugged it all in, started it up, and it just runs like crap. There was no throttle response. When looking at the laptop, I did calibrate the throttle position. Coolant temperature is okay. Engine speed, obviously once it's running it does show, and then ignition timing changes, and it obviously came with a base map, so it should have run right out of the box. But what I had noticed was that the map sensor, there was never a signal, no matter what throttle position. And like I said, it was running boom, boom, boom. So then I tested the map sensor, and it's lucky that I sort of have some understanding of what's going on. So I've got a 3-bar map sensor in place of the airflow meter, which plugs into here, and then there's an intake air temperature sensor which also plugs into the stock map sensor harness. So it's basically it's a map conversion, which I already talked about. But anyways, so I did voltage checks here, and I had 5 volts in the middle connector, and this output signal, which I thought it was output signal because this was ground. If this is ground and this is 5 volts reference, then 5 volt reference, and this would have to be a signal wire. No matter what I put the vacuum gauge on, there was never a signal. So I just thought maybe the map sensor was bad. I don't have another one to test with or to play with. There are some letters here, A, B, and C. According to a quick internet search, A is supposed to be ground, which it is. B is supposed to be the signal, which I have 5 volts. And C is supposed to be the actual reference, the 5 volts, which I don't. So when somebody made this harness, I think they swapped accidentally these 2 wires. So what I did was I took the connector off and I swapped the pins around. And if you look at the map sensor now, it does have a reading. And then when I pump it up, screensaver. So right now I have a reading of over 50 kilopascals. So there's 71 right there. Sorry, I didn't see the number. Before I had 0 all the time. And now when I pump up vacuum, you can see it drops down to 0. As if I was giving full throttle. So I'm hoping that this will run now. Just gonna hook up the vacuum line from the engine. Gonna leave the intake air temperature sensor dangling there. Idle air control can stay where it is. So I'm hoping it's gonna idle fairly good. A little bit of a hunting still. Yeah, still dies out, so it's gonna need some more work here. I'll get back to you guys. First thing you want to do when working on the electrical is disconnect the battery negative or positive, whichever you like. On mine, it's a 13. Just pull the cable off, cover the post so nothing can bridge basically. My 89 BMW 525i already has a battery tray in the rear, underneath the rear seat. What I ended up doing is I just cut out this little foam liner so that the battery mounting block is exposed. I still have to take this little cover off. The cell phone antenna or signal amplifier or whatever it is, I had to remove first. So now I just have to remove this tray here. And then the new battery cable I'm running along the passenger side here. There is room on this side, or at least there is an opening here, but I don't know how it will run along under here. It may not be as easy to run as it is on this side, and you can obviously see I took the seat out for better access, and so all I'm doing is running the cable along this stock harness area, and you can see it's a fairly beefy cable. I think it's rated up to 300 some odd amps, It's a welding cable actually, not regular battery cable. Should serve my purpose. My battery positive will be on this side, so I'll have a little bit extra length here. I'm going to trim later on, so I'm just in the process of feeding it or snaking it through on the passenger side. Going to come out on the firewall somewhere. Once I have the cable routed correctly, or enough to the point where I'm sure it's going to work, that's when I'm going to take the battery out in the front, get rid of the battery tray and make room up there. Okay, so don't laugh, but this is what I have right now. This battery perch, or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to cut that out. It's just mounted via a bracket here. There's a bracket here, and then I'm just going to cut it along this line. I won't do that now. I'll do that once I have the turbo, and that'll give me some more room. And then this coil obviously is going to go in a different place. Eventually I'm going to have a coil packs here, a wasted spark ignition system rather than distributor. And that way I can get rid of this distributor cap as well. But anyways, I got my positive. I got a big ass welding cable running from the battery. I'll get to that in a second, to the battery isolator here. Push it down, power is off, turn it back on, and then this feeds everything else like it normally did. My ground cable that used to go down here, that's disconnected, and I'm using that in the trunk. And that's just the regular ground strap that goes to the engine mount. I already cranked it. It gets really good power in terms of cranking. Sounds just like it did before. So here's the battery, perfectly placed like it should be. I'm using the battery clamp that I had, the mounting clamp, securing clamp that I had at the front of the car. Works perfect, fits perfect. Battery's solid. I got the original ground cable here. It's a little bit on the long side, and I just threaded it, or attached it to the chassis right there. And again, my positive, here's the big ass cable. Well, here it is. Don't worry about this clamp here. I know it's Mickey Mouse, but I have no problems using these clamps. And I'm going to treat it with some battery corrosion inhibitor, and that'll prevent it from corroding. But anyways, I left it a bit on the long side just in case, and it obviously snakes down under. And then it runs right along the chassis right there. It's nicely tucked away under here, under the upholstery, if you can call it upholstery, and then it comes up right here. And it goes through where the stock little battery powered cable went through. I wasn't expecting to have a 12-volt cable running all the way through, but there is actually. It's just a small gauge, and it connects to this red wire here. This red wire and this black wire, they're strapped together or taped together, but secured together with nut and bolt. So all I had to do, which was actually really handy, just take the bolt off and then connect it to the clamp here. So that's pretty much it. I just have to put the seat back in, and then battery location is done. The only thing left then is the turbo. This is the battery cleaner I was talking about. It turns into a pink foam, and then the pink foam turns color if there's acid present. But as the foam dissipates and dries up, it leaves a clean, dry residue. And it's actually a sticky film, more or less. And that prevents corrosion or reduces chance of corrosion buildup. Yeah, the seat's back in and everything else as well. Glove box I'm leaving out. I don't need that stuff anymore. But I forgot to get you guys a cranking sample. I'm just going to crank it, and you guys can hopefully hear how quickly it still cranks. One more time. Lots of cranking speed. First issue with my Megasquirt install. Went to start the car yesterday. After it had been running, I parked it, and then I went to start it, and it would just crank and crank and crank. Luckily, I had my USB cord with me and my serial adapter, Bluetooth adapter, so I hooked up my phone and I looked at the what's going on in terms of the engine parameters, coolant temperature, throttle position, map, sensor, etc. and I noticed that throttle position was reading 90%, 95%, as if I had the gas pedal floored. In that situation, the default for the computer is to cut fuel, as if you're clearing the engine of a rich flooded condition. So basically, no matter what I did with the gas pedal, the percentage the percentage did rise. It went up to like 130%. So that led me to believe that something was wrong with the throttle position sensor. I unplugged the throttle position sensor right then and there because I was basically away from the shop, etc. And once obviously I disconnected the sensor, the throttle position went to 0, so I know it's not a wiring issue. Otherwise, if it's unplugged and it still stays at over 100% or 90%, that would indicate that it's either a wiring problem or a computer problem. Now that it's read 0, I figured I'd try to start it, and sure enough, it starts, or started. And today I took some time to play with the throttle position sensor, and kind of hard to see, but there's water in here. Or I should say coolant. I had a coolant hose burst on me a couple of days prior, and I guess it migrated its way into the throttle position sensor, which is mounted here. The throttle sits like this, and it was just getting up under here, so obviously this O-ring wasn't really doing anything, and with water in here, or coolant, this is obviously completing a circuit that it shouldn't, and that's why my throttle is reading higher than it actually was or is. I've been driving with it disconnected. I'm going to clean this guy out, blow it out with brake clean, etc., and then I'm going to reassemble it and then see what happens. If I'm lucky, it'll come back to life. If not, I'm going to have to order another sensor, and what I'll do is I'll silicone the crap out of it to make sure that there is no water intrusion in the future. Sorry about the long-winded post here, or update. Until the next issue arises, hopefully not for a while. So as you can see, turbo is installed, same with the exhaust, intercooler and plumbing is also in. I think you saw that in the earlier video, but right now, and it's been running on Megasquirt without the turbo for the last couple of months, and it's been running really well, nice smooth idle on the stock 19-pound injectors. So I'm right now removing the injectors. That's the injector rail. You just disconnect the main harness plug underneath the throttle body, disconnect the coolant temperature sensors, and then you can pull this harness out. And then there are 4 bolts that hold the rail, 1, 2, 3, and 4 right there. And then with those bolts out, you can now lift the injector rail and then pull the injectors out. I just have to remove the fuel hoses here, and then I'll catch you on the bench. Okay, so I got the injectors out. I was hoping to take the whole fuel rail out as an assembly with the injectors plugged in, but that was not the case. So what I did was I separated the fuel rail from the injectors, and then I pulled the injectors out of the head one by one. This is the new injector that's going to go in. I've got 6 of them, obviously. These are 60-pound injectors. I'll just take you over to the car. So in the car, I just used a pry bar, and that's the rail here. I just pried up on the mounting flanges using the valve cover as a fulcrum point, and then that pried the fuel rail up off of the injectors, and then I was able to get the injectors out one by one. Some of the injectors came up with the fuel rail, and then I just used a tool. Let me show you here. I used this tool here. I wedged it in between the injector and the fuel rail, and then I squeezed it, and that popped the injector out. First you have to remove the little retaining clips. They sit in these grooves, and the fingers hold the injector, as well as the fingers hold the injector. These fingers hold the injector as well as the fuel rail through these slots here, and that secures them in place. Is that smooth or what? And quiet. Well, it's time to take it for a spin. Sounds like a fishing boat. Oh my god, this is gonna be fun to drive. I just came back from my first run on the highway with this car, and it's droning way too much, way too noisy. So I'm back at the muffler shop. They're gonna put a nice resonator on there for me. You know, it fits perfectly, as you can see. So version 1.1 is my turbo, and I think version 2.0 is going to be a blower and turbo. What do you guys think? It's a work in progress, that's for sure.